and welcome back to my channel where I'm going to cover the Barbarian's Path of the Zealot class specialization from Xanathar's Guide to Everything, providing a brief description of the subclass as well as explain and set up the various features that are gained. The Barbarians of the subclass are able to call upon their gods and make use of the divine powers provided by those gods during combat. There are many gods of the realms who are able to encourage their barbarian followers into the Zealot path, but generally those who represent combat, destruction, or violence in some form are the gods who will encourage the highest number of barbarian zealots. Gods such as Tempest, Torm, Tyr, Shar, and Merkel from the Forgotten Realms are all examples of gods that might encourage this kind of character or class. Characters of this class gain additional bonuses to overall damage, additional protection, the means to inspire and potentially stave off death, and in the event the character does die, even gains benefits if raised from the dead. As is normal for the Barbarian class, you can choose this subclass when your character gains level 3, which is when the subclass selection becomes available. And I will do that by dropping our Barbarian class into the character's level there and select Path of the Zealot. The first feature that your character is going to gain is going to be done immediately after you have chosen your class specialization, and it is called Divine Fury. This feature allows your character to apply extra damage to the first creature they hit at the start of your character's turn, each time your character starts a new turn. You get to choose whether that damage is going to be necrotic or radiant damage, and that will generally mostly align with the particular god that you have chosen for your character. For instance, if you happen to choose Shar or Merkel as your character's god, chances are you're going to be doing necrotic damage. But if you have selected Tempest, Torm, or even Tyr, you're most likely going to be doing radiant damage. But that is not a hard and fast rule. If you have chosen that your character is going to worship Merkel, you can still do radiant damage if you want to. But there might be repercussions from your god if you have done so. Just saying. The amount of damage that your character will be able to do when you use this feature is 1d6 plus half of your character's Barbarian level. And yes, I intentionally said it that way because if you are multiclassing, it is not your character's total level, it's how many levels you have put into the Barbarian class. To set this up, all we have to do is head to our Actions tab, drop Divine Fury into place, and this is going to be a Path of the Zealot grouping. That's generally where I recommend that you put it. Path of the Zealot. There we go. And we're going to want to modify the amount of damage that is done here. Unfortunately, though, you can't simply modify this particular effect here and do something like this. Barbarian, and add in half of your Barbarian level. The reason being is that anytime you put something after the 1d6, if there is a space involved there, it requires a damage type as opposed to an additional aspect. Finally, you can't put it in front because it follows the same guidelines. If you leave no spaces here, it still doesn't work, nor does using brackets around the whole equation work. The way that you have to go about doing this is as follows. There are two ways. The first, and let's fix that. So this is now back to what it was. The first is to add another effect, and it can be of the damage type or it can be simply an effect. I'm going to show you the effect option first. What you have to do is add DMG : put in the Barbarian level, and then put an H in front of the word Barbarian. And what you will see if I, for example, add this to our combat tracker, we also want to set that as self and on next roll. If you see what happens here, you'll see that a +2 damage is going to be added to our total damage. Now, as part of the testing, I intentionally leveled this character up to see if I could get the number to increase, and it wasn't when I was doing the initial testing. I had to break this out in order to actually go through and solve that problem. The other method that you could use is to go through and do this. Create a damage type, modify that, and add in a new effect look for your Barbarian level. So it should come up with, I just went past it. 1 second. There we go. And put a 0.5 there. That will give you the same effect, and you will see that there is a 2 there. Either one will work. Now, this, all you do is quickly click this before you roll your damage die. This you will have to click after you've done all of your damage and actually apply the damage. So I'll show you what I mean by that. I'm going to temporarily get rid of that. So let's say that I've attacked this white here and I've hit it. What I would then do before I roll my damage is apply both of these effects, one for the d6 and one for the actual half of the Barbarian level damage. And then I would roll the total amount of damage. And you can see that there's a +5 here, plus we saw a d6 die roll for its damage. But if you decided to go with this option, what you would do is you would apply this effect first, roll your damage, and you'll see that we have a +3 here as opposed to a +5, and then simply apply the additional points of damage. This can sometimes be hard to forget, to remember to do, so I highly recommend you use the effect option, but either one will work. Now I'm just going to clear out this additional effect because I like this. It's very clear and tells me that half of my Barbarian level is going to be applied to the total damage. It should also be noted that your character needs to be raging in order for you to be able to make use of this particular ability, in case that wasn't clear. Now let's move on to the next feature. Also at level 3, your character is going to gain the feature called Warrior of the Gods. And this feature essentially allows your character to be resurrected without the need of the priest executing the resurrection to make use of any components whatsoever. However, unless the priest or priests involved were aware of that before they attempt to resurrect your character, they will still most likely require the typical costs associated with raising the dead, including component and preparation costs, which is generally upwards of 500 gold pieces or more. All other restrictions still apply, in that if the character's been dead for more than 10 days, then the resurrection is most likely going to fail. This feature, however, doesn't need to be added to your Actions tab because there's no action here that you can use from it. However, if the Dungeon Master does want to know a little bit more detail about the actual feature, all you have to do is click on this and drag and drop it into place, or simply drag and drop it into place from your ability screen. When your character reaches level 6, they will now gain the Fanatical Focus feature, which grants your character the means to re-roll a failed save once if the character is in raging. However, this can only be done once per rage, meaning that if you entered a rage and then you use this particular feature, you would not be able to do so a second time until you let that rage expire or drop, or it fell off for some reason, and then you went back into another rage. Then you could use the feature again. Unfortunately, however, there is really no method available to modify the roll that you're going to get from a saving throw here, so that if you ended up rolling a 1, you would be able to re-roll it. That doesn't work within Fantasy Grounds. But that doesn't mean there isn't something available for you to do so. You can preload something, if you will, to the quick task bar down at the bottom of your screen. D20 reroll 1. And drop that into place. Now when you click this, if you happen to reroll a 1, it will reroll it for you, and you don't need to worry about it. So in this case, a 13 would work in potentially saving against anything that would be a DC 10 check, but obviously the 1 would have been a failure. The only risk with this particular option is that if you happen to roll a 1 the second time, it will re-roll. Whereas that counters the rule that will happen if you happen to roll a 1 again, you should use it. So there is a bit of a risk here, and right now there really isn't a way to prevent it from rolling just once. Unfortunately, at this time, Fantasy Grounds doesn't currently provide a means to restrict the die rerolls, if you will, such that if you rolled a 1 and then you rolled again, it would prevent any additional die rolls. There are other options to be able to control how often that happens for other examples of die rolls, but not for when it's specific to the dice reroll. And I can show that to you as an example. So if I do this, die a d2, reroll 1, and try to restrict it to 1. The pound 1 generally would restrict something like this to one event of that reroll actually happening. And if I click this, and it will take a moment, but if I get something that forces a reroll and then forces a reroll again, you will see that it will keep going until it actually has rolled a 2. Now, this is a known bug. It is currently being tracked by FGU-719, so I'm hoping at some point they get a chance to fix it. I'm just thinking they haven't gotten to it yet. But for now, there is that risk that you could potentially end up re-rolling multiple ones. Now, granted, on a d20, the odds are extremely rare that you're going to roll 2 ones in a row, although I have seen it done. And I will be sure that I provide a link to the rules that you can actually use for rolling dice and providing them from the command line or from a quick bar here in the description below. Once your character has reached level 10, they will acquire the Zealous Presence feature, which allows your character to inspire up to 10 creatures within 60 feet of your character and of your choice as a bonus action. As long as those creatures or party members can hear your character, they will gain advantage on their saving throws and attack rolls until the start of your character's next turn. However, once your character uses this feature, your character must complete a long rest before they can use it again. So let's go ahead and set this up in the Actions tab, because this is something that we'll want to put there. Now I'm just going to copy the path of the Zealot here and drop that down. Now we'll want to make sure that we add an effect to this that will do both attack rolls and saving throws until the start of the next turn. So we're going to add an action and go and add a new effect, and then modify that. I'm going to call this Zealous Presence. Hello US Presence, semicolon, and I'm going to go with ADV SAV, semicolon, and then ADV ATK. It's going to last for 1 round, and it's going to be on whoever you select, and it's not going to expire until that round is over. So, let's see how this works. Within the combat tracker, I'm going to go ahead and untarget the white and target the ape and the wolf. And I'm going to apply the effect to both of them, and you'll see that they have now gained this particular effect for both cases, and they have a D1, which represents 1 round. I have advanced the wolf to the point where it is now the active creature, if you will, in combat, and I'm going to target the succubus and make an attack roll. And what I should see is 2 d20s get rolled, which I do. And you'll see the shadow dice here, because I'm rolling this on the DM screen. And I do, in fact, that I had an advantage dice roll that was selected. Excellent, that is working, and this didn't go away. Now, if I progress the turn, that would be the dragon attempting to get its breath weapon back. Down to the Barbarian's next turn, we should see that both of those effects now disappear. Excellent. This is now working the way that we want it to, which means we have completed the setup for Zealous Presence. The last feature that your character is going to gain will happen at level 14, and it is called Rage Beyond Death. And what this feature gives your character the ability to do is essentially stave off death while in combat and while your character is raging. Essentially, the way it works is that when your character is knocked down to 0 hit points, they will not be rendered unconscious, and they will remain engaged in combat. Your character is still going to be required to roll death saves if your character has taken any additional damage while at 0 hit points, and at the start of each turn that they are still at 0 hit points. But regardless of what the result of that particular save is, they won't die. The only time your character is at risk of death is if they are coming out of rage while they still have 0 hit points and while they have still failed enough death saves to be considered dead. However, if your character has received healing before their rage has ended, and they no longer remain at 0 hit points. When that rage drops, it's completely immaterial what those death saves were. Your character's not going to die. This means that your character can remain in the fight for an extended period of time and soak up an immense amount of damage, all while the rest of the party is simply trying to keep your character alive, and at the right time before your rage ends, make sure that a last minute heal comes in. Otherwise, your character will die at that particular point. But the immense amount of damage your character will still be doing and the amount of hit points you'll be soaking up is a very, very powerful capability. However, once again, this is a role-playing based feature. It is not something that we have the ability to make use of through the Actions tab. But if your TM goes, how the heck is your character still alive? Then you'll have the ability to actually go and simply drag and drop the feature into the chat log so that they can pop open the information sheet on their screen and read through it, just to make sure that you're not totally telling a fib, if you will, while you're playing your character. But it is still an awesome feature for a character to have. And I think it might be one of a kind now that I think about it. The Zealot subclass really doesn't seem like an overly powerful class at lower levels, but as your character levels and they eventually gain that Rage Beyond Death feature, they're practically unstoppable and can soak up an enormous amount of damage, making them an excellent tank. However, this does bring us to the end of this particular class's list of features, and thus the end of where we can go with this particular character for this Zealot subclass. I hope you found this informative, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. I wish to thank you for taking the time to watch this particular video. I hope you found it informative and useful to familiarizing yourself with Fantasy Grounds in general, and that you had fun in the process. If you found the video useful and you liked the content of the particular video, go ahead and click that like button to let me know. And if you have any questions specific to the topic covered by this particular video, or just have some comments in general, please feel free to post something in the comments section, and I will do my best to respond to any questions that are asked. Additionally, I do release content quite regularly, and it's generally specific to Fantasy Grounds or 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons at this time. So if you'd like to be notified when new videos come out, go ahead and subscribe and click the notification bell to ensure that notification is sent to you when I release a new video.